It's Wednesday, Husker247 Daily. I'm Michael Bruntz. Brian Christopherson's over there. A little bit of breaking news, breaking-ish news on Wednesday as the Hoops portal is on its second day of being open. Berke in the portal after 2 seasons at Nebraska. We'll discuss that, and also the first day, it was fairly quiet for Nebraska basketball, but probably the most noteworthy entry so far is Berke this morning. Brian, what is that? How does that move catch you? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's the biggest one. I sort of thought he would return, and somewhat you're persuaded by your last interviews with guys sometimes, which you just have to actually beat to the side anymore because they don't matter. Like after the March Madness, like after the loss to Iowa, you know, you're sitting right next to Berke and he's talking about the pain of that defeat and how that's not going to happen again. And there's stuff like that that's said in the locker room right after where you're like, well, that guy's definitely coming back, you know. But then, of course, there's business that goes on in the weeks that follow, especially during this time. And that's what I think this is all about. Pretty sure of it. One guy has an asking price that is maybe above by even a considerable amount what the program is willing to pay, as they're also looking at other options, and you end up on opposite ends. I know Berke loved this program and this team that he was especially a part of last year. I said it was the most fun he's ever had playing basketball, and just had a lot of heartfelt stuff about the seniors. He just got a tattoo, in fact, Bruntz.
Of what?
That says 28-7. Like he got that like a day or two ago. He posted on Instagram on his arm, a small one. I suppose you can. Yeah, it is. It is tasteful. I liked it. I mean, you could have a tattoo of a season like that, you know, to remember that, and then I guess go on about your way with business of what's ahead. You know, those things don't have to necessarily collide. But it is an interesting time we're in, where a tat pops up one day and then a portal entry the next.
I mean, Brett Bielema has been able to coach without with that giant hawk tattoo. Eric Chenander had one too, right? That was his thing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, some guys just like to have tats of the various stops they've made along the way, and it was a memorable season, so that's okay. You know, obviously he was not the greatest shooter at Nebraska. Sometimes had his offensive deficiencies. However, he was very good defensively. If you look at the metrics for this team, played 24 minutes per game this last year. And when he was on that end of the court, it really added an element to the squad. And I did think one of Berke's best games was in the second round against Vandy. If you go back to he hit the 2 threes, but he had a couple big buckets sort of in that last 7 to 8 minutes when you had to have them. So he definitely stepped up in some big moments for this squad. And, he's an experienced big, and you could facilitate through him too. He had a game where he had 10 assists this past year. He had 3 Big Ten games where he had at least 4 assists. So there were times when there was a game or two where Rink was sort of off and the offense wasn't as in rhythm as you'd wanted, and they kind of found it with Berke. So there were definitely some high points for him, but the pursuit of other guys, I guess, goes on, and I do think they're getting closer maybe to landing a couple.
He also had, like, I think maybe the plus minus stuff. I mean, I know people sometimes roll their eyes at that, but he always was like sneaky good there. Or seemed to be, I guess, whenever you kind of look just at efficiency. And I think also maybe what he did on the defensive end and his willingness to kind of accept maybe a different role than what he was supposed to have coming in from UCLA, I think was maybe what will stand out to me most about him. I mean, when you kind of compare what he was coming from UCLA to what he is, maybe, I don't know, like there's more, it seems like there's more of an edge there with him than maybe was there coming in. Like he kind of accepted that kind of brawler power forward type role that Nebraska needed him to be.
Yeah, he had some really good plus minus games. I also thought he got much better this year at turning down some threes. You know, he knew that wasn't his forte. Of course, he took a few in the tournament. He hit a couple big ones, as mentioned, against Vandy. But if you looked at those, some of them were sort of in the rhythm of the offense where there's like 7 or 8 on the shot clock, and maybe it's the best shot you're going to find. And so he took it, and that's okay. So I always thought he had a pretty stroke. It just, the results weren't there. And I think in practice, he sometimes hit more than in the games. That's what they would always say. So you were always kind of wanting that, like the shot percentage to catch up with the shooting stroke, really. Cause you thought like, man, if that ever combined with the other stuff, that could be lethal. But you're right. Like he did buy in, I think, to his role on this team. He loved being on that team, and he kind of became a fan favorite in his own quirky way. I mean, you'll remember like after they beat Vandy, him wearing the Herbie's hat off the court and stuff that was silly, but I don't know. Fred didn't love it when he like took Sam's headband and was wringing it out over him in the TV interview. But I mean, that was sort of Berke, you know, like he had that sort of personality. And the bloody lip game, of course, was Wisconsin, I think. That was one of his better games. And, you know, he's exhorting the crowd. His blood is on his face like he's a gladiator. So definitely had some moment in this program, and I think sort of found his way probably at a much higher level this past year than the first season in Lincoln.
We haven't talked since Fred talked on Monday. What are priorities? Like what you mentioned, Nebraska might be getting close on some guys, but what should people expect over the next week or two to start rolling out? Because it's going to get quick here, I think.
Yeah, it is. Well, we were just talking about guys. I mean, I'm writing profiles about them that'll probably be up about the time this goes up. You know, like I think Drew Fielder, the guy out of Boise State, is wanted by a lot of people, but Nebraska's really put an emphasis on him, and he's one to at least keep an eye on. You know, he averaged 14.7 points, 5.7 rebounds last year. So there's some good stuff there. You can see why he'd be a fit. Trevon Lenhart as a guard. The more I've kind of dug into him, I've been pretty interested in how he could fit with the pieces Nebraska has. This is assuming you have like Sanford and Frager back, and then if you added like a 6'4" type of guard along with them who could help you with ball handling, but also be a lengthy defender to keep Nebraska sort of rolling on that end of the court. I think he's a name that's interesting. Trayson Anderson, of course, is a local kid from Lincoln, and I know immediately when he went in the portal, Husker fans were kind of intrigued by him. He averaged 10.4 points, 5.3 rebounds, and I could see that working too. They've done a nice job. You go through like Sam Grissel and Josiah Alec of finding sort of those kids who this program maybe means a little extra to them because they grew up in the state, and they've maximized those guys pretty well. And so he's kind of interesting on that end. You know, there's some other names that we can get to in the next day or so if we firm them up a little bit. But I know those are some guys that I think I'm safe in saying there's been conversations there from both ends.
Is there the point guard spot? I mean, are they looking for a true point guard, do you think? What did Fred kind of say on that? Or is it more going to be like a Jamarcus Lawrence off the ball type guy that, you know, can also handle it if needed?
Yeah, I talked around. You asked that initially, and I then answered with those guys' names. But it could be either, really. It depends sort of. Fred does not have to have a guy who's just a true point guard. And he would tell you, and did say on Monday, like last year, even though Jamarcus kind of tried to grow into that role and Sam would handle it, and even Cale Jacobson, they're not true point guards. That's not like what Jamarcus grew up playing until he got to like his sophomore year at Nebraska. And Sam was always an off the ball guy too. But they had that big who you could run the offense through, and we would see it even in the NCAA tournament game. Rink could bring it up the court, or Berke would bring it up the court sometimes, like they could use those big men as triggermen. And I feel like it sort of depends on like what type of big you find. I think they might want at least two, now definitely out of this cycle, two big men, but especially one that that you could plug into ideally a starting role. And if he's sort of a point big, so to speak, where he could be like a Rink or a Derek Walker or a Royce White or what have you, then maybe you don't need as much a true point guard, and that other guard is something that's a little more, he's a ball handler, but he doesn't have to be like just a point guard in every sense of the word. If you don't quite have the bigs like that, then I think that guard definitely has to be a guy. And Fred has had these players too, who you'd say that's a point guard through and through. So it kind of depends, I think, a lot on who their 1A big is, right? Like what his skill set is. And you're kind of thinking about that as you're looking at your guards too.
Yeah, because I mean, the bigs, you're looking, ideally you would have like a Rink, like a Derek Walker type who is comfortable being able to kind of be the point man on the offense. I mean, I think that's kind of been where they've had the most success, and where a lot of their matchup issues have come from for opponents.
And I also think that's what the money, we all know, and we're seeing it in the news of the day, that the money speaks the loudest of all. We're not naive about that. However, if everything...
No.
I mean, but
really?
If everything is close, though, if everything is close, and you're like, let's say a player is looking at 2 or 3 options and the money is sort of in the same ballpark, he would have to look, especially a big man, at what Fred's done with those guys and think like that could be the tipping point to make this decision, because it's fun. Like to be a big man who's handling the ball and guys are playing off of you, and there's pressure with it. You got to be a cool, collected dude. And it was such a treat to sit like courtside, because we rarely do it anymore, for that second round game against Vandy. I know you've thought the same thing I did. When you watch both those defenses get after, like in the grill of like that, to Rink and Berke and stuff like that, you have newfound appreciation almost for like how you could even keep your turnover number down, like under 8 or 9 turnovers per game, because it is like so intense. And you've got to really have a guy who's collected at that big spot. So I think that's what you're looking for. Can you find that guy who not only can he stretch the floor and occasionally hit a couple shots, that would be great from deep because it brings out the defense, but he's got to be someone that you sense could take the heat in those kind of moments.
For sure. We'll have plenty of transfer portal coverage today and ongoing as Nebraska looks to build its roster for next season. Right now at Husker247, there's a transfer portal special, 60% off your first year. If you're looking for a deal, now's the time. Brian will have plenty coming on portal targets, everything else over the next few days. So get it to Husker247 for all that. We'll be back with another Husker247 Daily on Thursday.